Hello and welcome to No Dumb Questions. This is Rob Long. Now, I should say, when I say no dumb questions, it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to ask dumb questions. It just means that you can ask dumb questions and we're not going to get upset. And I came up with that because I tend to ask a lot of dumb questions. And I'm here with Glenn Loury. Ricochet members will recognize him. He's obviously been a Ricochet podcast guest many times. He also has a terrific podcast, new podcast of his own on the Ricochet Network. Hey, Glenn, welcome. You want to say a few words about, are you having any fun doing that podcast? We cajoled you into doing it. So you...
Yeah, Scott was after me. I'm having a lot of fun. Selling some ads, getting a lot of downloads and stuff, and
that's good.
You know, doing my weekly conversation stuff.
Are the ads weird to do?
It's different,
right?
You know, I've never quite done anything like it, but I'm warming to the task. You know, I'm making fun exercise out of reading the ad copy.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because, like, I don't know how. I mean, is it rude for me to ask how old you are? But
I am 70. I'm 73 years old.
Okay, so like, well, you look pretty good. You look really good for 70. I'm 56, so we're not, you know, we're different, but we're still older than we remember. I remember radio ads, right? When you listen to the radio driving around, and so like, yes, and that's kind of my only model for it. When I do them, although I tend not to do them, I had James Lilacs do them. He's really good at it.
I'm sure you're better than I am.
I think, you know what? I honestly feel like they like it when it's a little bit real. You know, like it's like you're not supposed to be good at it. You're good at other stuff. You're not a professional radio announcer, sort of what I mean to say. Okay, so if you are joining us and I know we have a bunch of participants now joining. If you got a question for Glenn, put it in the Q&A section, not the chat section, because like it has too many screens for me to be open. So the Q&A section is a perfect place for that. Before we start, okay, so I don't really know how your day works right now. Are you teaching? Are you in a classroom right this minute? I mean, not right this minute, but I mean this semester or whatever, this year?
I'm teaching 2 courses this semester, and that's 4 days a week, an hour and a half each day that I'm teaching. Monday and Wednesday, my course on race, crime, and punishment. Tuesdays and Thursdays, my course on free inquiry in the modern world. So I have to prepare. You know, I spend a couple of hours, maybe 3 hours for each class that I'm preparing. So that's 4 times 3 is 12, and then hour and a half in the classroom for each class. That's another 6. That's 18.
It's exhausting.
It's enough.
Right. Now, okay, so I want to ask a little bit, because I'm teaching myself one class this semester at NYU. So I feel like I'm part of the academia now.
Okay.
I'm trying to ask this in the most diplomatic way. Do you feel that the students that you see now are as prepared or equally prepared or more prepared than the students you used to see?
Okay, I'm at Brown.
Yeah.
Before I came to Brown, I taught at Boston University. Before that, I taught at Harvard and at the University of Michigan. So these are all, you know, pretty respectable places. Ivy League is the Ivy League. The quality of the students is higher, I think, at Brown or Harvard than it was at Boston University, although there are no slouches, you know. But asking about long time ago versus now, I guess I'd have to say maybe not quite as prepared on the average.
Why do you think that is? I mean, I've heard other professors say the same thing.
I don't know. I mean, I'm loath to speculate. I mean, you think of K through 12 and what standards are being held up there. I mean, the universities are not just places where kids are coming to get an education. They're also coming to have a good time. Right. Maybe that has something to do with it. I guess if you looked at international comparative data on, you know, how our students, American youngsters are doing in testing and basic subjects, you might not see some trends that you like. You might see that things, I don't know those numbers right off the top of my head, but my impression is that we're kind of lagging behind, certainly in the technical areas of STEM disciplines. I mean, I teach economics, I teach courses that require, a certain amount of mathematics and a certain amount of kind of
Right.
analytic sophistication. And, in my race, crime, and punishment course, if I break out an equation and I start trying to explain a model, half the class's eyes will roll back in their head, and you could hear a pin drop in there. So it may be that we're in the K through 12 not spending as much time as we should on basics, but I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Okay, well, that's good. Well, speculating from experience. So then my second question about this, and we can move on, but just because I know you're in the classroom. So if you read conservative media or listen to conservative media, it's pretty much understood. Universities are just daycare centers for woke snowflakes, and you got to make sure, you get the pronouns wrong and that you're out the door. It's sort of like working in a somewhat benign version of, a post Pol Pot Cambodian or during Pol Pot Cambodian university. You got to watch what you say. Is that even is that an overstatement, or is it probably good caution? Maybe not for somebody your stature, but for somebody who's starting out.
Well, my stature and also my identity, I'm Black. I can probably get away with stuff that if I say the N-word, not maliciously, but
Right.
it just comes out,
Right.
I was listening to this comic the other night, and he told the following jerk, N-word. Nothing's going to happen to me.
Right.
It's just, if I were to lapse into vernacular in the context of a lecture, and then I were to get into a kind of jargon, talk kind of hip hop, ghetto talk, quote unquote.
Right.
Clearly I would be performing. I'd be performing as a Black. I'd be performing Black as a Black. And I could get away with that. But a white professor who tried to go, you remember Warren Beatty in that movie Bullworth? I don't know if you ever saw that.
Oh, right.
Movie.
Remember that? Yeah. Oh my God, exactly.
If I were a white guy and I broke out in one of those routines, I'd probably end up with my head being handed to me, metaphorically speaking. There'd be complaints.
Right.
I would have been, microaggressive or macroaggressive or whatever. So there's that.
Does that bug you, or is that okay?
That I get a kind of pass on some stuff?
Well, that you get a pass on some stuff and you don't get a pass on other stuff, I guess.
No, I mean, I think I'll take it. But I think the environment is a certain degree poisonous. There are the students, and yeah, the ones who are most activist and radical and prickly and thin-skinned will make a big deal out of a Title IX thing that could actually be very minor, or make a big deal out of a racial hostile environment. He made me feel uncomfortable, etc.
Yeah.
There are a few. They're like, I don't think most of them are like that. But what I want to say is, I mean, I think the tone is set by the faculty, not by the students. I think the faculty, both in their pretty monolithic left political leanings and their embrace of every fad that comes along that has some claim at progress, quote unquote, progressivity, and also in their lax reaction to student. If Charles Murray goes to a college to give a talk and somebody, throws something at him or shouts him down or whatever, the students who are doing it are not hauled out on a rail. They're not made examples of. They're not shown to have been wildly inconsistent with the codes of conduct that make our institutions possible. Instead, they're lionized. They're made into little heroes, or they're given a pat on the head. And I think that's part of the problem.
Well, is it hard? Is it hard to, like, if you're the grown-up administrator at a college, is it hard to actually just say what's obvious, which is you're not allowed to shout somebody down, you're not allowed to
you wouldn't think so. It looks like that's a pretty easy thing to do, but for some reason or another, very, very few are inclined to do it. And these kids are getting away, with murder. Okay, that puts it too strong.
I know what you mean. Okay, well, you'll be too old dude sitting here complaining about the way the world is, which I get. Right. But I had a couple questions. I'm getting filled up here with Q&A, so I want to make sure we get to that too. And I don't know how to ask this question in a polite way. I could just ask it bluntly. Does it bug you at all that it's black professor, black economist, black conservative, you could, if you identify as a conservative, that you're the kind of the go-to guy for the right wing. Well, wait a minute, Glenn Loury and over here with Thomas Sowell and a few others. Does that bug you being in that position, and who put you in that position? Or is it just kind of like, hey, that's my brand? I mean, what's the, it just seems to me like it would be hard. And every now and then I just be kind of pissed.
Gosh, maybe I am pissed and just haven't been willing to admit it to myself. Maybe
well, I'm charging you for this. This is therapy. Yeah.
Yeah, it is therapeutic. It goes with the territory. I've gotten used to it. As I said, I'm in my 70s. I've been teaching in colleges since 1976. That's almost 40 years. Oh no, it's 46 years.
Holy moly.
God, it's a long time. That's when I did my PhD, 76, my first job at Northwestern. I've been teaching for a long time. I mean, there aren't that many Black conservatives. So the fact that if the AEI or the Hoover or somebody, Manhattan Institute or somebody, a senator on the banking committee needs somebody to testify, whatever, on a race-related thing, and I get the call, that doesn't surprise me. I don't feel diminished by that. I mean, race is not the only thing that I have worked on over the course of my career. It's not the reason why I'm a, if you'll allow me, fellow of the Econometric Society, and distinguished fellow of the American, et cetera.
Yeah, get some stuff. Yeah.
I got some chops over here, but I think the thing that annoys me more than a conservative saying Glenn's our go-to guy is the liberal who says you're Black and you're conservative. I can't bear that idea. I mean, that infuriates me, as if the racial identity thing were so determinative that it decided for us what we were supposed to think about fundamental questions, fundamental questions about how you organize society, or fundamental questions about what's the meaning of life or whatever. And it's a reduction of the complexity and the depth of a person, me in this case, but I think the point is general, to these categories and these boxes. That is very annoying to me, and I strike out against it.
Do you consider yourself, are you the most conservative person in your social circle? I mean, I know you are in your professional circle for sure, but in your social circle, are you? I mean, I guess what I mean is, like, I know that the Black conservatives that I know always say the same thing, which is like, yeah, I'm conservative compared to like what you're seeing on TV or MSNBC or whatever, but I'm basically a centrist compared to my family or my life or the people that I know in my neighborhood. Is there a dichotomy there for you, or is just you've been academia, so it's kind of all blended together?
No, I actually, I talk about this at the Glenn Show, my podcast.
Yeah.
From time to time, talk about my marriage to a wonderful woman. LaJuan Loury is my wife. She's from Houston, Texas. She was a Bernie Sanders supporter. Okay. And
that is a strong relationship.
It's like a mixed marriage. Okay. I mean, it's like I was Jewish and she was Catholic or something like that. I mean,
yeah.
And we we love each other, and I'm not worried that we're not going to make it here. We've been married 4 years. My previous wife of 30 years died of breast cancer in 2011. I remarried in 2017, and it's all good. It's all good, but it makes for an interesting breakfast conversation. It makes for, I'm checking out Tucker Carlson, and she walks into the room and turns up her nose. Oh, Tucker, oh, he sucks. I said, no, he's the only person talking about Russia and Ukraine that makes any sense to me. These people are getting ready to march us over a cliff, and this is the one guy that's saying stop, like that. I mean, that conversation goes on 2 or 3 times a week.
That's hilarious. Well, that just shows it can happen. All right, so I got to ask some questions here. I want to make sure we got to talk about the economy in a little bit, but before we do, did you watch the Oscars?
No, I didn't. I have seen the slap, but I didn't watch in real time. No, it's not that great a show, I've found.
No, that's for sure. I agree with you there. Do you have any thoughts on the slap? Was the slap? The slap seems to have two or three possible responses. One is sort of white progressive response, which is, this is a thing, we can't talk about it. Then there's sort of the Black progressive response, which is, this is a thing, you can't talk about it. And sort of everybody else is kind of like, oh, I mean, it doesn't seem like it didn't seem as fraught as people wanted it to be. It was just a guy who kind of went too far and should have sat on his hands, or am I misreading it?
Well, if you're LeBron James and you go out and do something stupid, it has a bigger impact than if you're just a guy.
Right.
If you're Will Smith, I mean, he's an iconic figure, et cetera. So role model and all of that. I hate to saddle him with that, but that's
right.
The territory that he's operating in. I thought enormous disrespect was shown to his professional colleagues at their annual convocation, where everybody's in their gala tuxes and their gowns and everybody's being celebrated and everything like it. It'd be like, God help me, it'll never happen. But should they call me up from Stockholm and say, hey, you're our man this year, Nobel Prize, whatever. And I went to the ceremony and had a beef with somebody. And then I shout out, So it was like this breaking of a kind of.
That's a great scene, though. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, that could be in the movie.
Yeah.
But it was a kind of contempt for the scene and for the people, et cetera, self-importance and whatnot. But again, I don't want to psychoanalyze Will Smith. From what the gossip that I hear, he's got a lot on his shoulders and whatnot. Maybe there's a case that could be made that he just lost it. Right. I don't think it did the Academy any good.
No, it didn't do the show any good, really. That's an interesting question. Like it was exciting. But it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like it on balance inures to the Motion Picture Academy of Arts and Sciences when you get
it cheapened it. It cheapened it. I mean, Chris Rock could have told a lot of raunchy, poor taste jokes that would have cheapened the scene, sexual or whatever. He didn't do that. He made an offhand comment about the way somebody's head looked. But he could have acted in ASS up there. Chris Rock could have in the raunchy comedy that we know that comes out of places like some of these comedy clubs and whatnot.
Where you have recently performed, by the way. Let's remind you were recently at the Comedy Cellar.
Yeah, but my most recent post at the Glenn Show is an hour and a half long recording of a show that I emceed at the Comedy Cellar with a half dozen really good comics and a few intellectuals, talking about the role of comedy in opening up space to have political arguments that would otherwise be taboo, because the comic can always, the comic has plausible deniability. Oh, come on, it's a joke. It's a joke. Lighten up. It's a joke. But it's not just a joke, when he or she hits a nerve, they might be pointing out some stuff that really needs to be talked about, but people are afraid to come at it directly. That was the idea of this conversation that I hosted with Noam Dwarman, who owns the Comedy Cellar. He owns the place.
Kind of a guy right of center, from what I understand.
Yeah. In New
York independent,
City, for sure.
Independent, and independent in New York City counts as right wing.
Yeah.
You had there was a good group up there. We should next time we should post it. Make sure that some of your listeners and Ricochet members get to go. Did you see any of the Ketanji Brown hearings?
I watched here and there. It was kind of formulaic. I mean, it wasn't like riveting TV.
Right.
So since I'm not that beat, I didn't have to write anything about it. I didn't follow it closely, but I heard her be asked and not answer the question about what is a woman.
What is a woman? Right. Have you ever testified? Congress
before Congress? Yeah, I have on occasion. Yeah.
Is it, I mean, it just seems like, I'm just trying to think of the nice way to put it. It just seems like a waste of time. It doesn't seem like there's a certain kind of like, oh man, really, Congressman, that would come. I don't think I would be able to do, not that I would have an area of expertise, but I think if somehow somebody wanted me to testify, I think it'd be hard for me not to sort of roll my eyes at some of the stupid questions. Was that your experience, or did you?
Well, I was asked to talk about unemployment or affirmative action or, something. And I have a prepared statement which goes into the record, and that's really my testimony. And then there are these questions. In the case of a Supreme Court nominee, it's theater, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's not really information being extracted. The staffs will have done that all in the background, and then there are the extended private meetings that the candidate has with the nominee, with the members, and that's where that will actually happen. The thing that you see on TV is theater. each member gets to perform, and their audience is not the witness. Their audience is their constituents and the press and so on. And I gather that's what we saw in the case of Judge.
I think it's a good point. I mean, the audience that that doesn't know how to define a woman was served. The audience that believes that the world is going crazy because ordinary, smart, intellectual academics, judges can't define this sort of most basic difference in our species. I mean, did that scare you?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't really care. I mean, I can't really pretend that I'm like exercised by it. But when someone shows it to me so clearly, I get a little scared that we're in a position now where we're not. Either she feels she really can't, or she feels that she really mustn't.
Well, there was an answer to the question. In my mind, I'm not a biologist either, but the XX and the XY, the chromosomes at a certain location in the human genome, they're the chromosomes that determine sex. And, a man has an X and a Y. He got the Y from his father, who got it from his father, who got it from his father. This is how they actually study these long-term evolutionary questions in human populations following the Y chromosome. That's at least one of the techniques. So if you don't have a Y, you're not a man. I mean, and if you have a Y, you're a man. Now, you may, in the fullness of time, come to understand yourself in different terms. And, we certainly don't, there's no reason not to be,
right.
Generous and empathetic and whatnot in the face of that situation. But please don't ask me to forget what it is that I know, which is etched into the human genome. So that was the answer. Now, I know she knows that answer. Right. So the scary part was not that someone is going up on the court who doesn't know something. She knows it full well. The scary part is that she was so intimidated by the climate within her camp that to answer that question directly, flying in the face of the ideological cast of her camp, would have been more problems for her than to make herself look like a fool. I say with respect. Right. I don't mean any disrespect. I mean, it is foolish,
right,
to ignore the difference between the XY and the XX. I mean, that's just what the human genome is. So such has become the power of this lobby. That's what it is. This is a lobby of a relatively few people. We're talking single digits, low single digits of the population here, who have got people cowed and intimidated to the extent that they refuse people who want to remain in good standing with the Democratic Party activists, to acknowledge reality. That's what's frightening to me.
Does anybody ever come up to you, I mean, at university or at other universities where you speak and say, I agree with you. I agree with you. Just, I mean, how many quiet friends do you have? You must have a lot. Don't show this email to anybody. I'm going to text you, but please. Does that ever, I mean.
Yeah, I get that. I get that a lot. And I also get it not only from colleagues, but also from strangers who write in saying, oh, here's one. I'm a partner at a big law firm in Cleveland. We have a large number of Black associates who I don't think are up to snuff. Some of them are going to make partner here because we can't have a class of partners that doesn't have any Black associates in it. I tremble at the prospect, but dare not say a thing. Please don't quote me. That kind of thing.
What do you say?
Well, I mean, I'm not, a counselor. I mean, I say, I hear you. I won't quote you. I'm not surprised to hear it. I do think in my research about affirmative incentives and the information issues and so on that are raised by racially preferential programs, and this kind of dishonesty, you can't be alone. If you think this, you have colleagues who think it as well. You dare not say it. Why? Because, well, that'll mark you as someone unsympathetic to a righteous cause. And yet, you know what the bottom line of your firm is going to look like 5 years out, 15 years out, and it's something rightly that you're concerned about. How interesting is that? That even when the bottom line is at stake, people are loath to call it like it is.
So why do you think they write you? Well, what do they want from you?
I guess they want an affirmation. Or maybe they're saying, here's a data point. I heard you give that talk. I heard you talk about affirmative action and express some concerns about incentives and about reputations. And I can tell you from my experience that you're right. You know,
Yeah.
maybe they're just telling me I got something out of what you had to say, and here's why.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably it. There's also this sort of need, I think, for people just to know that they're not the ones going crazy. You know?
Oh, I get that all the time. In the YouTube channel where the podcast videos go up, and people write in comments, "You're keeping me sane." During the summer of 2020, when the mostly peaceful protests ensued, when a guy called Jacob Blake in what was it, in Kenosha, Wisconsin, got shot by a cop as he was wielding a knife, trying to kidnap his kids, stealing his girlfriend's car. And he turns with a knife in his hand, and the police officer shoots him. And he becomes a cause celeb of the anti-cop crowd. And he becomes a vote gathering device for the Democratic candidates for president and vice president of the United States, who call him in the hospital room and then issue mournful public statements about how Jacob Blake has suffered, et cetera, et cetera. This is a miscreant. I mean, I would say with respect, but I mean, after all, let's be realistic. He not worthy of a whole lot of respect based on his actual behavior. He becomes an iconic figure because he's a purported victim of a phony allegation of police violence, and the presidential candidate and vice presidential candidate are touting this, and people are pulling their hair. And I'll say what I just said, and then they'll write and they'll say, "Thank God, I thought I was the one that was going crazy. You're helping me stay in touch with reality here. Thank you, thank you, thank you." So I do get that, and it's very encouraging to hear that from people.
It's encouraging for me to hear that. I know I'm going to talk about the economy in a minute, but before we do, can we just talk about culture one more time? If you look at the culture today, you'd think, "Oh my God, everything's falling apart. It's getting worse and worse and worse." Which is kind of, I mean, you started teaching in 1976, where it did not look like things were going to ever get better. Inflation, economy, stagflation, all sorts of things. Do you have, I mean, I'm trying not to lead it here because I full disclosure, I tend to be an optimist about these things and tend to think that things swing back. Do you think so? Or are you thinking to yourself, we may just have to get used to the fact that a certain portion of our culture and country cannot and will not in the future be able to define what a good father is, what a woman is, what a crime is? I mean,
I wish that I could say something hopeful here. I'm very pessimistic. What's the metaphor? You can pull on the loose thread and unravel the fabric, but you can't reweave it by pushing on the thread. And when some stuff is gone, it's just gone, I think. You know, the long march through the institutions metaphor. I mean, these people are dug in. They're in the fight. The fight now is for, you know, the Florida, they call it a "Don't Say Gay" bill, where, you know, that's parents get to get a say in whether or not their third grader is taught about Heather has two mommies, and et cetera. And that's where we are. We're fighting critical race theory against a entrenched professional class of ideologically blinkered people who think that your kids are being liberated by them taking them out from under the sway of your despicable, conservative, conventional, binary, cis heteronormative, et cetera. And they're dug in. They're dug in the education schools. They're creeping into the medical schools and into the law schools, and they're getting dug in. And the pushback is thin, and the press on the whole are handmaidens in this, and the political incentive, et cetera. So I don't know. We'll see. I have a friend who says, well, look, the DAs are being, the Soros-funded so-called justice DAs are being given a run for their money. They're being, you know, facing recalls, and they're recalibrating and they're pulling back. Okay, maybe. We'll see. You know, the Asians have this affirmative action case going up to the Supreme Court. We'll see. The Supreme Court's hearing an abortion case term, we'll see. COVID came along and kept Donald Trump from being reelected in 2020. I'm pretty sure that he would have been reelected, but for COVID and his mishandling of it and so on. And a lot of January 6th and all of that, and the left are doing the best that they can to try to use every misstep and every opportunity to keep the silent majority silent and to change the subject and not talk about, we didn't really mean defund the cops. No, that's not what we meant, actually, et cetera.
That changed pretty fast, though. I got to say, I was pretty surprised to hear Joe Biden say at the State of the Union, fund the police, fund the police. I thought, wow, that's fast even for him. I got a whiplash right now. I just got used to defund.
Yeah, defund was pretty crazy with the homicide rates going up all across the board. So.
Right. Okay, so talk about the economy for just a little bit.
Okay.
How much trouble are we in?
Well, this is not my area of specialization within economics. Let me say that there are people who do this for a living. I'm very concerned. I mean, inflation could be a problem, and I've always thought and was taught in graduate school, inflation is a monetary phenomenon, and there's a lot of money out there.
Famous Milton Friedman line, inflation.
Yeah, that's Milton Friedman. It's a monetary, it's everywhere and always a monetary phenomenon. And there's a lot of money out there. And, we probably overdid it on the some of the COVID relief stuff. People use it as a Christmas tree, where everybody's got their ornament that they want to put on because now we're going to do the New Deal 2.0 and all of that. And, the people whom I talk to, economists like Larry Summers, like Lawrence Kotlikoff, my friend who teaches at Boston University and is a macroeconomist, comes on the Glenn Show a lot. He's kind of my economics editor at the Economist podcast. Are very worried about the long-term fiscal implications of spending beyond our means and so on. So I think it's a real issue, and if we don't get it under control, it could get out of hand. Fortunately, we haven't seen real economic activity slack off. We've come back. We're coming back. Unemployment is relatively low, and so on. Workers are hard to find. There's upward pressure on wages. That's part of the inflation problem. So stagflation, is not exactly right around the corner as far as I can tell, but inflation is definitely a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, the economy seems to be growing, but there are also these strange little moments and bumps in the road, or not bumps in the road, I should say, but like little adjustments to it. We are essentially canceling student debt. So the student debt repayment's been pushed. It'll probably be pushed again. We're really talking about are not poor, broke graduate students.
Agreed.
We're talking about professionals, people who went to law school, medical school, who can afford to pay their loans. We are subsidizing their incomes. That doesn't seem like a good thing to do. When you subsidize something, you get more of it, not less of it.
So the pandemic again is being used as an excuse. It's a relief measure because people are under duress. So it's alleged, and it's supposed to be temporary, and they're avoiding actually making the move that the ultra left among the Democrats want to do, which is just across the board cancellation of the debt. And I agree with you that it is a very regressive policy in the sense that the beneficiaries are better off than the people, the average Jane or Joe, who are going to be paying taxes that'll underwrite this. But even more than that, you signed a contract and borrowed money, just like anybody else who borrowed money to start their business or borrowed money to purchase their real estate or whatever. You don't get to decide after the fact that, I don't have to pay. Student, what's so special about student? In fact, it's exactly the other way around. It's not as if these were fly-by-night establishments that sold you a bill of goods and took your money, and now you're trying to get the government to make you whole. You got human capital. You got your professional degree. You got your engineering training. You got your leg up in the economy, and you're benefiting from that. You're reaping the benefits of the investment. You borrowed to make an investment. You made the investment. You're reaping the benefits of the investment. And now you decide, because it's called a student loan, you don't have the obligation You don't have the responsibility to meet your obligation, and you call that justice? That's supposed to be progressive? I mean, where's the serious left that would say, I mean, a socialist leaning party that would say, in the face of this obviously class tilted to the computer class, to the people who make their money from in their pajamas, sitting in their ante room, telecommuting, saying to them, you got yours already, Jack. Now it's time to take care of the working man. And here's what we're going to do to take care of the working man. That, it seems to me, is what a real progressive reaction to such a proposal would look like.
But it does seem like, if you look at all the things that people spend money on, and consumer things, right? TV, entertainment, travel, all of those costs are going down, or flat, or going down. What seems to never ever go down, but simply go up at a multiple of the rate of inflation, no matter what it is, health and education. And to me, it feels like, if you're on the left, you look at that and say, well, we got to subsidize more. We got to have a single payer health plan, subsidize all of it, where we have to have free college and cancel student debt. But if you're a conservative, you say, no, you don't understand. Those things are expensive because they're subsidized, not despite their subsidy. But the federal government lends you money pretty easily to go and take as many degrees as you want. Your insurance is, you know what I mean? That the involvement of the government in the payment systems for those two things increases the price, doesn't control the price. What is that?
It certainly pushes up demand, and that's what they again teach us in basic economics. You push up demand, you're going to.
Which I never took. Rising, this is what counts, by the way.
Cost.
This whole conversation is my hit. All right, so I know we only have you for about 10 more minutes, so I want to just to get a little bit more personal. What's the worst job you ever had?
Oh, wow. Well, do I get to count that Burger King job that I had when I was in college?
What Burger King was it?
Working from 5 o'clock until closing time, and running around in this little box of a cottage where they're selling these burgers, and and sweeping up afterwards, and dealing with asshole customers, and etc.
Wait, was that so you look back on that now and you say, oh man, what a terrible job? Or do you kind of the way older people, when they get to turn about 45 or 50s, do well, I'll tell you, it taught me this and taught me that? Or is it mostly just?
No, it didn't teach me that much. You better get out of bed when the alarm clock goes off, otherwise you're going to be late and they'll dock your pay.
Where'd you go to school? So get a picture.
I went to the Illinois Institute of Technology. That was the first college that I went to right out of high school, but I ended up flunking out. My girlfriend became pregnant. We married. We started a family. I was working full time, but then I went back to school at Northwestern University, where I got my proper undergraduate education, and then transferred and went on to graduate school, and started a different kind of life. But there was a while there when I was knocking around. I went to a community college for 3 semesters after IIT and before Northwestern University.
And then eventually you're at Harvard.
Well, I became a professor at Harvard. 6 years past my PhD, I was hired as a professor of economics and of Afro-American studies at Harvard in 1982.
I think I remember
40
that.
years ago.
And then you left because why'd you leave Harvard, man? That was get the big H.
Yeah,
the second greatest university in the country.
A lot of people have asked me that. Well, so it's a long story, but the short version of it is, I had a fall in my life. I mean, I had a real scandal. I got accused of assaulting a woman with whom I was having an extramarital affair. I didn't assault her. The case was later dropped, but there you are.
Yeah.
I had a drug problem. It was all very public. I went through a hellish 2 or 3 years and came out the other side of it just fine at Harvard. And while my colleagues at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, where I was a member of the faculty, were supportive and, kind and urging me to, keep a stiff upper lip and hang in there and whatnot, I just wanted a fresh start someplace.
Makes sense.
I, it's maybe chalked up my psychology. A lot of people would have just weathered it out. Um, I didn't want to be dependent upon their magnanimity. I wanted to start over with a clean slate someplace. So I walked across the street. A man called John Silber was president of Boston
I
University.
remember him very well. Yeah.
And he said, you tired of being condescended to over there? I tell you what, he said, I'll double your salary if you come over here and teach our kids. And I said, okay. So that was 1991, after 9 years at Harvard. After 9 years at Harvard, 1991, I went to Boston University.
He was a dynamic guy. That guy. He ran for the governor.
Yeah, he did. He should have won. Actually, he blew it in, TV interview where he made an off-the-cuff remark that can't remember exactly what it was, but it was one of those things you're not supposed to say as a politician, because he was a gruff, sort of no nonsense, tell it like it is type guy. So he told it like it is a little bit too directly, and he ended up losing a close election for governor. And that was the end of his political career. But he was a brilliant man. He took Boston University from a streetcar college of no particular distinction to being, a really first-rate university. I mean, he ran roughshod over a lot of stuff. I mean, he broke the faculty union.
Yeah, I know. I remember that.
He said "F you" to the faculty union and stood them down.
It was an inspiration, I got to say.
Yeah, he was a great man.
Yeah. So were you kind of conservative the whole time, or did you have like some kind of moment?
So when I went through my crisis at Harvard and came out the other side of it, and I became a born-again Christian.
Wait, so were you a liberal before that?
Liberal would be no. So okay, I grew up in Chicago, Black community, South Side. Everybody was one stripe or another of a liberal. So was I.
Right.
By the time I got to Harvard in 1982, I was starting to have real doubts about a lot of the political left and of the racial advocacy, civil rights leadership types. And I moved away from that, and I became a Reagan Republican in the 80s. I mean, I was reading people like George Gilder,
right,
Thomas Sowell, who was around and doing a lot of good work in the 1970s and the 1980s, and he's still around doing a lot of good work. God bless him.
It's amazing. Yeah, I
mean, it is amazing. And the people like Jude Wanniski. I remember some of these congressmen like David Stockman, who ended up, Jack Kemp was a friend of mine. He became a friend of mine, and a young Newt Gingrich, and a lot of these guys. And they were talking supply side stuff, and they were saying incentives mattered and whatnot. And there was, I became a neoliberal economist, a guy that believed in markets, a guy that believed in sound money, a guy who thought private property wasn't such a bad thing, and who understood that seeking out profit was the foundation of our prosperity. It was people seeking profit that led to a better widget, a better mousetrap, etc. So it was that. There was stuff on the race front where the Jesse Jacksons of the world at that time, a young man, relatively young man, who was pushing what he was pushing in terms of racial advocacy. I wasn't impressed by it, so I gravitated toward the conservatives. Then I met the neocons at Harvard. Bill Kristol was a young assistant professor at the Kennedy School when I showed up there. William Kristol, his father, Irving Kristol, was still around and writing, and Nathan Glazer and James Q. Wilson, the late great political scientist, criminologist, people like that, Richard Herrnstein of Bell Curve fame, who were my colleagues at Harvard, E.O. Wilson, the sociobiologist, others of a relatively conservative stripe. And I was like the only Black guy in the room, but I found a set of compatriots, who were and gravitating around the Public Interest, that magazine that they put out. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Senator Moynihan, was a part of this coterie of
Democrat, by the way, we should say to people who don't know.
But a sensible Democrat, a kind of Cold War fighting Democrat, a kind of, split the difference with the other side Democrat. But anyway, that was an environment that helped to nurture my conservative development. Now, I tacked back left a little bit in the 90s and the aughts, but I've since found myself comfortably settling into the niche that I first cultivated in the early 1980s, and I don't think I'm going back.
Yeah, you created the groove here. All right, so a couple more little questions, just because I'm sort of interested. What do you? How much do you read every day? I mean, are you constantly reading? Or is it all work reading, or is there some stuff you're reading? You're like, this is just for fun.
I just finished with my sons, Glenn the second and Nehemiah. Nehemiah lives in San Francisco, by the way. He's a data scientist, works at Yelp. And Glenn is a writer and works in retail banking. He lives here in New England. But in any case, we have a book club in honor of their late mother. And we take turns choosing books to read. And
that's great.
They're not workbooks. They're fiction, science fiction. Sometimes they're nonfiction books, but it's mostly the kind of thing that they find fun. And we just read this trilogy by I don't know how to pronounce the Chinese name, Cixin, Cixin, Liu, Liu, Cixin or Chixin. I don't know how to pronounce it, Liu. But anyway, he's translated, of course, into English. Trilogy, science fiction trilogy, which I won't begin to try to describe, except to say that the three books, The Three-Body Problem, The Dark Forest, and Death's End, these are 500-page tomes, and they create this wonderful imaginary world of interstellar travel and of conflict of civilizations throughout the galaxy and whatnot. That it's brilliant. These books, even in translation, are just wonderful. I mean, I think they'll be read 50 years from now, pieces of literature. But that's an example.
Yeah, no, that's great. So where do you read them? Do you have a favorite place to read? That's. I mean, for me, there's some places where if I'm there, I cannot read something I have to read. I must read something that's discretionary. Do you have that, or could you just pick it up anywhere?
Well, I got my Osaka Japanese massage chair.
Okay, that seems exactly right. That's the answer I wanted.
The feet go up and the vibrations and the thing, whatever. And as long as I can stay awake, I'll sit in my chair with my book.
I like that. All right, last dumb question, but I always want to know, what's the best meal you ever had?
Oh God, I actually can answer that question. My wife and I spent 2 months in Toulouse in the south of France.
Oh man, you're gonna kill me.
My wife of 4 years, Lawan, just a year after we were married, and we took a trip to Nice, and we ended up in Monte Carlo.
Oh man.
Okay, and so we're at this hotel. Gosh, if I could only remember the name of this hotel. It's a 2-star restaurant, but those were 2 pretty good stars. Okay, this is a Michelin 2-star restaurant. Blue Moon something. I can't remember the name of this luxury hotel with Lamborghinis and parked out in front of it. People's yachts, you could see them. And the Tony set come up from the yacht, in their pristine attire to sit at these tables, this big open room with the tables like 8-10 feet apart from each other, and this kind of high ceiling thing with a glass window looking out on the thing. And they brought us one course after the other of these wonderfully rendered, extremely flavorful. I'm not a gourmet. I can't tell you exactly, but I was living high on the hog that night. I can tell you, the portions were tiny.
Right.
And that was okay, because every bite was being savored, and it was just a wonderful experience. The wine steward guy had some recommendations for us. We spent less than $1,000 for that meal.
Pretty good. So you're telling me,
I feel like I got out pretty lucky.
Yeah, you did actually, right. The wine is what kills you. You're telling me that you went with that wife of yours to the south of France, and you had this incredible meal overlooking the bay with the yachts and the super yachts and everybody dressed up, and she still's voting for Bernie Sanders.
That's an argument that I have deployed without success for a long time.
Well, that's good. I'm glad
I say, look at how we're living. Look at how we're living. Only in America is this possible. You know, capitalism is the foundation of our prosperity.
Right.
She sneers.
She's like, wait, let me finish this caviar before I respond. Hey, Glenn, thank you so much for joining. This has been a real treat.
You're welcome, Rob. It's been fun.
The podcast is on the Ricochet Network. If you if you don't subscribe to our super feed, you got to go find it. The simple thing to do is get on the super feed. You get it automatically. It's terrific, and all the best. Hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot, Rob. I enjoyed it. Bye.